morning and happy Tuesday 10 at 10. I am your host, Richard Charpentier, and we're here to answer your questions. And I'm a baker, so bakers sending questions and bakers answering your questions. So let's get it started. Uh, First question that we have is there an approved stability method for dry yeast or instant yeast? So the way I'm reading it is stability, meaning, to keep your yeast longer, in terms of shelf life, and so you don't lose the potency of the yeast. So it's going to work all the time. So most of the dry yeast or instant yeast, dry yeast, so it's either dry active, or dry instant. And the difference between the two is the instant, technically, you do not need to pre-hydrate it. The active, you would need to make a slurry with warm water and give it 15 minutes so it can expand and activate. So that's the difference between the two. But in terms of a stability a method, what I've learned is, I was asking a friend of mine who's in the industry, was saying the only way you can make a yeast last longer if you have those packets is remove the air as much as you can. So because oxygen will have a negative effect on your yeast and the stability of the yeast. So if it's tight, seal, and keep in a dry, cool place, it's going to last longer. But as soon as it's opened, then you're going to lose some of the yeast activity, the potency. So hopefully it did answer your question, but that's the way it works. So moving on to the next question. How can I make cultured wheat in my lab? Let's think for a second. Cultured wheat, what we know, we hear it, cultured wheat, cultured corn on bread bags where people use it for the propionic and lactic acid production in order to make their bread or the shelf life last longer. So can you make it in your lab? Yeah, technically, the way I look at it, this is nothing but a sourdough bread. So what is a sourdough? Sourdough is a culture. And as you feed your culture and it grows and expands, and then you use it to make your bread, and then you take some of it and you refeed, you add more fresh flour, and basically the fungi, the yeast, the natural yeast, the sourdough, will keep on producing and eating the food, and in exchange they will give you acids. So yes, you can do it. Start a culture in your lab, mix it, and wait till it grows and refeed it and use it, and that portion will have natural lactic and propionic acid. You do generate that when you make a bread, but once you ferment a bread, it's a shorter fermentation, usually 2 to 3, 4 hours, or the traditional bakery. But here, if you allow it to have longer fermentation, you're producing more acid, and therefore those acid will be beneficial for your shelf life. But great question. Next question. On water activity, does the amount of protein and fat added into my recipes decreases the water activity? So great question. Simple answer: fat will not affect the water activity, as protein will affect the water activity. So fat does not change it. No, protein will. But for something like that, I would go back to the water activity page on BAKERpedia. Go there and go look at all of the information that Dr. Lynn Carson has already put on the BAKERpedia page, because right now we're going very quickly through it. And it's to understand that hygroscopic, basically the non-hygroscopic molecules will affect, so meaning things that have potential to bring in or hold on to water. And basically, humectants are the only one working and having an effect on water activity. So I know it's again very short, but what I recommend to all of you guys watching, Baker page, go look on the topic of water activity. Lots of great resources, highly recommended. But in short, protein will affect your water activity, fat will not. Thank you. So, but a great question, and it's again, it's a topic that needs hours and hours to cover in order to fully understand. So, next question. We have someone asking, they are located in a tropical weather area with high humidity, and our breads get moldy quickly. We monitor cooling, handling, and what can we do to control the that. And as I mentioned earlier with the page, there's another great page you need to go check is on bread cooling. And it's on the Baker page. Dr. Lynn Carson did a fabulous job with this, where you'll get all the information needed. But it's always best to not want to force cool too long, because forcing, to cool it longer, especially you might be getting mold also by your cooling, and you're saying, okay, our breads are cool. But there's a one rule of thumb. As you cool your bread, it's important for the temperature at which you put into your packaging to be in plus or minus 10 degrees from your ambient temperature. So, for example, what does that mean? If you're a bakery in subtropical, I'm going to take Jamaica, for example, they run around 85, 90 degrees, or in the bakery, it'll be 95 degrees. So if you bread, you're cooling it, and you're cooling it where now it's at 45 degrees internally, because you're like, hey, great, we'll cool it down. And you're going to put it in your bag, you're creating condensation. And by creating condensation in your bag, you're sealing it. And now as the bread is coming back to equilibrium at room temperature, it will create condensation in your bag, and therefore molding much quicker. But if you get mold, as a tip, I would say, as we mentioned earlier, cultured wheat, cultured corn, and you add it to your bread in order to bring your acid and TTA and control that. And measure your pH and TTA, total titrable acidity. If you can do it, actually measure your pH so you know where you are. And if you do all of the right measures, as you mentioned, safety and people, maybe gloves and everything, and you're still molding, also check the internal temperature of your bread to ensure that you are 200 degrees when coming out. They're fully baked, and I'm sure they are. But that's something, again, we have consultant available for a minimum of 30 minutes on the BAKERpedia page on bakery resources. You can find, I would just go check. It's worth the 30 minutes. Might be something very simple, but love to help you guys on with your issue. Now, last but not least, question. It's some manufacturer making, they're talking about 500 to 1,000 bagels per batch. And they're basically using a convection oven. And what they do, they start adding trays of bagels while other trays are baking. And some of the bagels do not spread or expand like others, and they take longer to bake. And bagels are boiled. Appreciate the feedback. So same. Go on the page on the BAKERpedia that talks about humidity page. It would be a great resource, like I mentioned earlier, where you would understand what it does. But basically, the way you're treating it similar. I've been to old school bagel bakeries where it's a revolving oven, and you take it and you fill it, unfill it. It's constant. It's nonstop. But when you do in a convection oven, once you open the door and you're putting fresh, just basically boiled bagel to be baked, you're bringing in extra humidity. And as you're raising the humidity in your oven, you're basically changing the temperature. And that is why your bagels will take longer. They will not brown the same way. So it's always better in a convection, once you fill it up, just wait, and don't start with a fresh batch. It's not like a revolving oven that you're used to. And on the convection, maybe your fans, maybe the speed fan, but basically you get a box with a lot of force heat versus another old school style, and that's going to create some issues. So my recommendation is, look into maybe a different oven that's not going to be, especially if you have the production, that's not going to basically damage some of your products, because right now, if you look at your efficiency, you're probably not at where you want to be. If you do that, maybe you're baking faster, but if your products are no longer good sellable units, then you're not doing yourself justice. So look it up, and again, that's something, if you're interested, love to chat with you, and on a one-on-one consultation video, we could discuss maybe what's the best equipment recommendation for your bakery and for your basically the volume you're doing today with your bagels. So thank you very much. Again, that's it. It's a wrap. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in to Tuesday 10 at 10. I'm your host, Richard Charpentier, and you have a lovely day and happy baking.